You know, when I used to think of New South Wales, I used to think of the Three Sisters, that shrine to fruit and bilpin that hasn't been repainted since the 70s. In fact, come to think of it, I pretty much just thought of the Blue Mountains and being 8, wearing one of those old Coca-Cola hats and crying at a bunch of sights that aren't interesting, but also not wanting to go home because your bum starts to hurt at the end of that train ride back to Sydney. And it sickens me that my children won't have that very lukewarm childhood memory. I will gladly take that can't tell if the bottom fruit is supposed to be an apple or a pumpkin statue over the future of New South Wales, which is going to be a bunch of Kleenex boxes that even Soviet architects would have refused to work on, as there's brutalist architecture and then there's brutal architecture. Look at that. Don't you think the architecture of a city reflects the psyche of its people? The Soviet Union was terrifying and bleak, and so its buildings were terrifying and bleak. What does Sydney say about us? Yeah, I want to make as much money as possible, with as little effort as possible. You might say it's tacky. I'd say I don't give a fuck. And the intent? The Soviet Union was building those apartments because their government was thinking, how do we house 40 million people before they freeze to death in the next winter? The Liberals are simply thinking, how do I make this cunt as much money as possible before a court freezes his assets over in the next quarter? Property developers are the shadow government of New South Wales. You can tell that they're the shadow government of New South Wales, as guess which was the one industry that was given a guarantee that they'd be up and running within 2 weeks of the lockdown? Construction. What? Paragliders don't practice the 1.5 metre rule well enough? There's another dead giveaway, which honestly, so much more bleak than Soviet mega blocks, and that is that the New South Wales government decided to create the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, your one-stop shop for building shops over scops. How's that for dominance? 3 departments that are supposed to be checks and balances on each other merge just so property developers don't have to go to 3 separate offices to get 3 separate rubber stamps. That's why you need to remember, kids, property developers are to the Liberals what the cotton industry is to the Nationals. And judging by One Nation's graphic design, their God is Channel 10 logo from the 90s. And look, to be fair, if God existed, that's probably what he looks like. The most spiritual experience of my life was after 9 every day hearing, "See you later, cheeseoids!" Brrr, 10. Look at this. Under what was current trends, 25% of houses will be duplexes, or as I like to call them, Australian dream simulators. 50% will be Soviet-style apartment blocks if they were built in a laissez-faire capitalist system, and the other 25% will be freestanding houses. That's how upper-class living in a house will be. Having a freestanding house will be like this woman in the 1800s Paris painting that had a pet monkey. When I first saw that, I thought, nah, that can't be right. Have it drive around any of those suburbs that used to look like Andy's neighbourhood in Toy Story. It's just Singapore now with more red roosters. So I looked into it again. Those estimates were from 5 years ago. As a couple of councillors I've spoken to have told me since, policy changes in urban development take about 5 years to become visible. So what happened 5 years ago was council amalgamations, heavily targeting a bunch of Labor councils and those NIMBY, no, that sandstone house had heritage. They created mega councils, and what you're doing when you create mega councils is you're de-democratising them. If you go from representing 100,000 people to 400,000, who cares if there's a carols by candlelight amount of, let's be honest, specifically this lady that are pissed off that you're pulling down all the Moreton Bay figs? And sorry, God bless that lady, she is fighting the good fight, but she has to be the mayor of Balmain. Has to be. Welcome. Try these strawberry and fig jam preserves and don't even think about touching my Moreton Bay figs. Get over figs! What happens when you amalgamate councils is you've made them big enough to not care about community action, but still far too small to put up a fight against fucking multiplex. Town planner I know was talking about this, and he said that when Lend-Lease walks into his council, it's like Vikings walking into a medieval village. You can see the public servants scurrying in and out of their offices, swallowing their rings because they know that they have no power. They know that even if they try and resist them, there'll be one rat amongst the ranks who's got ambitions of going to state, and if Lend-Lease puts in the bad word at a state level, Planner's career dead in its tracks. Best summed up by him saying that when it was a state Labor government, you know what the motto was of the planning department? Do right by the community. You know what it's morphed into under these pricks? As someone high up in the Lib said to him very clearly in a meeting once, quote, "Your job is to roll out the red carpet for developers." There's no recording of it, but given the context of reality, that shit would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Especially when any development proposal over $30 million isn't even controlled by council anymore. The state libs have created something called regional planning panels. Now that's a nice name. It sounds like they're going to launch the Snowy Mountains Fig Jam Festival to entice specifically the mayor of Balmain to come and blow $500,000 over the weekend. Oh, antique shops, oh. But really, regional planning committees are there so that when Multiplex says we want to build a tower on top of Sir Henry Parkes' house so high that the top 20 stories will require oxygen masks just to enter their house, all community consultation is circumnavigated. It's just, yep, no worries, could never tell the difference between Henry Parkes and Charles Darwin anyway, go for it. Now the Libs will say, no, it's a panel that has council representatives on it, and that's community consultation because councils represent the community. And yeah, a third are representatives of the local council. They might even say something like, can you at least build a park on top of this concrete Mount Everest and call it Parkes Park? But the other 2/3 are experts, appointed by the New South Wales state government, and guess who they side with almost every time without exception, because if you said 60-year-olds holding placards that you look at and think, come on, where is he? Where's Bob Brown? They don't. They side with the property developer, almost inevitably. In fact, so often that one of the planners was taking the chairwoman of his regional planning committee around his precinct, and she actually said, while looking at this massive crime against aesthetics, David, did we approve that? Yes, Madam Chairwoman, you did. That's a shame. They churn through so many of these monstrosities that it's like some ex-con slitting like 100 sheep's throat a day in an abattoir. These are the supposed experts we're supposed to trust with these shortbread shoe boxes that are cracking before they're even built. That's the speed and lack of oversight with which these scars are getting slapped up. The absolute bottom line is that under Labor, local communities had a say if this was built next to your house. Under the Libs, you've got nothing. You've got no say, no oversight, no accountability. Just how quickly can we get this card tower up? Who gives a fuck if it collapses? And if you think that's bad, if you think all of that is terrible, just remember, as the councillors and planners have told me, wait another 5 years. If you remember all the Obeid and Ian McDonald stuff, that was the result of property developers allowed to enter the Labor Party. The difference is Labor realised its mistake. They even tried to rectify it. Nathan Rees lost his premiership over trying to reform around it, but once the rod is in, it begins. Labor learned its lesson the hard way. They've banned property developers from running at any level of office under the Labor banner. They've banned donations from them. They're trying to ban property developers from running for any office in New South Wales, full stop. But guess who's shutting it down at every turn? That's right, the Liberal government! Yeah, I understand that this is just another, did you know the Liberal Party isn't as good as the Labor Party? But I want to know how deep this rabbit hole goes. If you have any information at all, if you work at the DPIE, if you're a planner, if you're a council member, let me know, contact me, because more or less, I think it just taps into everybody's 60-year-old Balmain mum of, "I'll stop putting those awful coloured stripes down the middle!" Like and subscribe, pussies. And also, check out my friend's very clever rap about Liberal Party economic mismanagement, which, as we can clearly see from the pictures, their mismanagement is hood. Also, get a brush shirt available at friendlyjordies.com. See you next time.
Please share and comment below. Comment.